What's going on, guys? So in this video we're going to be looking at PyScript, which is a new framework that allows us to write Python and use Python packages within the browser, within our HTML, which is really cool. Now, I have seen some memes on Twitter and some YouTube videos saying, you know, is this going to replace JavaScript, or is JavaScript doomed? And I really hope nobody believes that, because we're not going to be using this for the same stuff we use JavaScript for, like basic front-end DOM manipulation, fetching data from a server and displaying it, etc. Where I see this being really valuable is with like data science and bringing those powerful Python packages like pandas and NumPy, being able to use those within a browser environment, I think is going to be really useful and really powerful. All right, so it is an alpha. It's very, very new. There's not a lot of content on it, so this isn't going to be like a full crash course where we build a larger project. We're just going to mess around with it. So if we go to PyScript.net, you'll see that we have some HTML tags, and then there's a PyScript tag, and inside that you can write any Python you want, just like you can write JavaScript within a regular script tag. And to get set up, there's an install button, but if you click on it, it says, just kidding, you don't need to install anything. And you do need to include this PyScript JS. All right, and then there's also a PyScript CSS, which I believe is just Tailwind. It has all the Tailwind classes. And then, of course, you could download those files if you want. And if we come down here, it tells us a little more about how this works. And it works using Web Assembly, or WASM, along with this Pyodide. So Pyodide is a Python distribution for the browser, and I believe Node.js as well. And it's based on Web Assembly. So it makes it possible to run Python and install Python packages in the browser. And it uses something called micropip. So some bullet points here just to quickly go over. So external hosting, application hosting, there's no reliance on server-side configuration. Okay, so Python in the browser. We can use the Python ecosystem. We can install different use different packages. Python with JavaScript, I thought this was pretty cool. It has bidirectional communication between Python and JavaScript objects and namespaces. So you can actually write Python code and JavaScript code right with each other, which felt a little weird, but I can see that being really useful, and you can even access browser web APIs with Python. So environment management, you can define what packages you want to use and what files. You can have multiple files. Visual application development, there's UI components like buttons and lists and containers. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there's not a lot of content on this, but if you go to this link here, Project Home on GitHub, and then you go to PyScript JS and then examples, there's quite a few examples here to get you familiar with like how this works. And that's what I did. I just cloned this onto my machine, and I just went through some of these. And a lot of these use other packages like Bokeh and D3, what else, NumPy. And then there's also this to-do HTML. And this is kind of how I saw how we can actually use the DOM with Python. So if you can see here, there's an input and then a button, and this button has this PYS on click, which points to an add task function, which is a Python function. And if we go into todo.py, you can see the add task function, and this shows you how to basically select from the DOM and how to take in inputs and create tasks. So this is a nice little project to see how things work, especially if you're not familiar with these other Python packages. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. I'm going to grab those two files. So right here, we want the script tag and the CSS link. We're going to copy those, and let's make that smaller. And then I just have just a empty folder here in VS Code, and I'm going to create an index.html. And let's just create a boilerplate, and we'll say PyScript demo, and then I'm just going to paste in those two links there, and then we should be all set. So I'm going to open up Live Server, and we're going to see this loading runtime. and we just have a blank page, obviously, because we haven't done anything. So in the body, we can go ahead and create a py-script tag. And in here, we can write Python. So for instance, we'll create a variable called name, just set it to a string of Brad, and then I'll print that name. Now, I'm going to have an issue when I save, and a lot of you guys might as well. So I have formatOnSave enabled with Prettier, and you can see this is not going to work. Python is very strict with indentation and formatting, so we have to shut that off. And you can do it globally, or you can just create a new folder called .vscode. And then inside here, we can create a file called settings.json. And we'll create an object, and we want to use editor, editor dot, and then formatOnSave. We want to set that to false. So now if we come over here and fix this formatting, and then save, now it's not going to format automatically, and we should just see Brad on the screen. Now we can put any Python we want in here. If we want to define a function, like let's say get sum, something very simple, and xy, and then we'll return from this x plus y. Okay, and then we'll create a variable called sum and set that to get sum. We'll pass in 5 and 5, and then let's just print. So we'll say print sum, save, and we should get 10. All right. Now, like I said, you have access to some JavaScript objects and namespaces. So, for example, if I want to console.log sum, I could do that as well right from within my Python code. So if I were to open up my console, we should see somewhere, we should see 10 right here. So you can see that's getting logged in the console. Now, at the moment, we're just printing this out on the screen. We're not targeting it. So usually if you have some output, you're going to want to specify where that goes. So let's go above the PyScript tag, and let's have a div with the ID of output. And what we can do, let's say we want to put this sum value in that div. We could go ahead and say PyScript and then do a .write. And that's going to take in two things. The first is going to be an element with the ID where we want to put it, the value, and the second will be the value. So if I save that, we're still just going to see 10 on the screen. However, if we go to our Chrome tools and I go to elements, you're going to see that 10 is actually inside of a div with the ID of output. All right, and I'll actually add, let's add a class to this of, we'll say text-3XL, because we have all the Tailwind classes available to us because of this PyScript CSS. All right, now before we move on here, I just want to show you another tag that we can use called REPL. And if we just do that and save, you're going to see that now right on our web page, we have a way to just access our Python interpreter. So for instance, I could set a variable here and then just say X and then run that, and I'll just get 100. I can even access my code here. So if I want to use that get sum, we'll say get sum, and then I'll use that X value, and then let's add another 100 to it, and we should get 200. All right, so you can do that as well, but I'm just going to comment out that REPL. Now, if you wanted to use, let's say, a module from the Python standard library, let's actually just get rid of this. So let's say we want to use math. We could import math, and let's say in our output, we want to do math dot square root of 10, save that, and that should output the square root. Now let's say we wanted to import NumPy, which is a very popular package for data science and mathematical operations, arrays, and so on. So if I try to, let's say, import NumPy as NP, and then we'll come down here, actually let's create an array. So we'll say array equals np.array, and then we'll pass in here an array of we'll just do some random numbers. All right, so we have some random numbers, and then here in our output, let's just output the array. like that. And we should get an error message. So we get this message here, no module named numpy. So if we want to use a package like this, we have to define it in our environment. And the way we do that is in the head. So we'll go right in the head here, and we're going to use the py-env tag. And then any other files or packages that we want to use, we need to define here. So we just simply say hyphen and then numpy. And we'll save that. And now we get our array. So now we're able to use that package. We don't have to do any kind of like installation or anything like that. So very, very powerful. So if I wanted to, let's say I just want to put the array, I don't want this, the array type around it. We could use an F string in Python. So we could go like this and then wrap that like that. We could even say like my array is, and then save that. And it should just print it out. My array is, and then the array. Now, you're probably not going to write much Python from within your HTML file within a PyScript, just like you wouldn't really do this with JavaScript. You'd have a separate file. So let's create another file here. I'm going to call it main.py. All right, so we have a Python file, and then I'm just going to grab what we have here and cut that, paste that in here. Let's fix this up a little bit. All right, and you'll probably get some squiggly lines like this. I don't have any kind of, I couldn't find any extension to fix that, so we'll just deal with it for now. But I want to include that file, right? So if we come over here, we can add, let's say, source, just like a JavaScript file, and then /main.py. All right, so if we save that, we should see the same result. We're just targeting that output div, and we're putting in this my array is. Now, ultimately, what I want to build here is something very simple and kind of silly, but just to get you understanding how this stuff works. We'll have the array, the numpy array, and I want to have a button that we click to shuffle it around. So let's go ahead and actually add some styling onto this. I want to put this array in the middle of the page. I also want to remove the my array is. I'm going to keep the F string though, because I don't want to have that array parentheses around it. So we should just see the array. Now we'll go ahead and just add, let's do a main tag, and we're going to do container, and I want it to be the entire height, so we'll do h-screen. These are just Tailwind classes. And then let's do flex, make it a flex column, and we'll center everything. Let's say items-center and justify-center. And then we're just going to move that ID of output into that, and then that should be right in the middle. All right, cool. So now let's create a button underneath it. So under that div, I'm going to create a button and give it an ID of shuffle. And then let's just add some classes. So mt4 p-2, we'll do text-white, and background will be blue 600 and rounded. And then we'll say shuffle, save that. We should now see our blue shuffle button. Now I want to add an event listener, and we're going to do this with PyScript. So let's add on to this an attribute of pys, so PyScript -on click, and we're going to set that to a function called shuffle_array. And then we want to create that in our main.py. So we'll go ahead and define shuffle_array, and this is contaking args, so we're going to do *args, and we want to go ahead and actually, you know what, before we actually do the shuffle, let's just do PyScript.write, and we'll replace, let's say, output. For now, we'll just replace it with hello, just to make sure the button actually works. All right, so now if I come over here and I click this, okay, so now that turns to hello. So to actually do the shuffling, I don't really work with numpy. I don't know it very well, so I found a solution to use the random module. So let's say import random, and then we're going to come down here. Let's go right here and we'll say shuffle, and we're going to set a variable called shuffled and set that to a function called sorted, and then that's going to take in our array and then a key equals lambda, and then k colon random, and then we're just going to call the random method here, and that should shuffle it. So if we replace this now with shuffled, let's save that. Okay, so now if we come down here and I click this, there we go. So now it shuffles it and it prints it back out. Now, obviously this is very simple and kind of silly, but I just want you to pretend that we're doing some really advanced data science stuff with NumPy. All right, and we're able to do that and have it in the browser, have events change things. So that's where I think that this is going to be, really helpful. All right, so let's, there's a couple other things I want to show you. To target an element, we can use this PyScript.write, but we can do it in more of a JavaScript-y kind of way. So I'm going to go up to the top here and create a variable called output L, and we can set it to capital E element and then whatever ID we want, like output. All right, and then we can do console.log of, let's say, output underscore EL. And then we'll save this. Let's open up our console. And what that gives us is this object right here, this proxy. So it doesn't give us the direct element. If we want the direct element, we have to actually add on to it dot element like that. All right, so let's go ahead and save that now and see what it gives us. All right, so now you can see the actual div with the data inside. So it gives me the actual element. And instead of doing this PyScript dot write, what I could do is I could say output element, and then we could say dot inner HTML equals, and then we could set that to an F string with the array in it. So let's get rid of that console log. So this is more of like a JavaScript friendly way of doing it. And then down here, we could do the same thing. So we would just take this, we'll comment that out, paste that in, and we'll set that to shuffled. So now that should give us the same exact functionality. So now if we click that, now it shuffles. So you might want to have more Python files that you want to import, that you want to bring in. So let's create a new file called utils.py. And I just want to give you an example of bringing in something from a separate file. So I'm going to have a utility function to add a CSS class. So let's say define add underscore class, and we want this to take in two things, the element itself and then the class name that we want to add. Okay, and then in here we're going to say the element, and then we want the class list object, and we're going to call add, and then we want to add the class name. Oops, we're using this syntax, class name. All right, so we'll save that, and I want to be able to bring this add class function into my main.py, but to be able to do that, we need to add it to our environment. So here where we have the pyenv, we have our NumPy package. If we want to bring in any external files, then we want to define here paths, and then we just want to define each file. So we want utils.py like that. Okay, so any packages you use, any files you use, you're going to put here. It's almost like a package.json. So in our main.py now, let's bring that in. So we'll say from utils, we want to import add underscore class. Okay, so now we should be able to use that function. And all I want to do is make it so that when we click shuffle, we add a color class and change the color of the array. So we'll do that right here. Let's say change color. and we can call add underscore class, and the element that we're changing is output L, and the class that I want to add, let's say text-blue-500. All right, so now I'll come over here and click that, shuffle, and there we go. So now you can see it turned blue because it added that class. All right, so the real power here is the ability to use a package like NumPy within the browser, within the front end, without having to set up Python on a server and installing packages. I mean, we can just set up our environment like this, and I think that is huge. It's not about just being able to simply traverse the DOM with Python versus JavaScript. That's stupid. Why even bother making something like that? The real advantage here is being able to use the power of Python and the packages that it comes with in the browser. So hopefully that's clear. It's not about building this silly little application. Just pretend that the shuffle was like some crazy data science functionality. I don't know. I'm not really into data science. It's something that I do want to look more into, though. But that's it, guys. Hopefully you learned something from this video. I would suggest going and playing with all the examples that are offered to kind of, wrap your head more around this. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.